At the exact second the room erupts for his promotion, he lifts my hand like a rented prop, kisses the air a breath from my knuckles, and calls me a pretty accessory. And every laugh that follows lands on my skin like glass dust, while the stem of my champagne trembles between my fingers and refuses to steady. The ballroom sells perfection as if it were a brand, river light slipping through floor-to-ceiling windows, a string quartet bowing something tasteful and expensive, a skyline that looks curated for photographs, and a guest list arranged with the precision of a cap table. The board chair at center, investors down the right flank, department heads left, spouses and partners orbiting like quiet moons. I had pressed my dress to be invisible and undeniable at the same time, the American trick we learn early. Carry your competence in a way that doesn't embarrass anyone who has less of it. When the applause swelled for him, my partner, my sometime co-founder in everything except the paperwork that somehow never materialized, I felt pride rise like heat, and then felt it turn, curdling hard as the word accessory drifted across white tablecloths and met the microphones. The room laughed the way rooms do when power cues them. I tasted metal at the edge of my mouth where the flute had kissed too sharply, and the quartet missed a beat before finding the measure again. I have never been good at fainting. Humiliation, for me, works like a dimmer switch, not an off, a slow, merciless turn. The laughter smeared into a kind of velvet murmur, and the sound of forks against china scuffed a moment into something uglier. That's when I saw the program booklet propped against a monogram napkin, an elegant serif font announcing the evening's order. Welcome remarks, promotion toast, gratitude for strategic partner EM. My initials in print inside a hotel where a seat card 2 inches from my wrist labeled me +1, and a man at a microphone had just rebranded me as decoration. I touched the corner of the booklet with a thumb I couldn't convince to stop shaking, and told myself to read, to keep reading, because evidence is a better friend than adrenaline. Across the room, the CFO watched me with an expression I recognize from boardrooms where numbers argue harder than people. Cool assessment with a filament of curiosity. Not pity, and not the soft disdain reserved for women who make a scene. His eyes flicked to my partner's wrist when he dropped his arm. Mine did too, because the watch he wears is engraved with the lie that once felt like a promise. 7:12 p.m. The minute he said our future started. Tonight the minute hand was off by 1, a small misalignment you could excuse as careless servicing, or you could accept as omen if you believed in that kind of thing. I don't. I believe in receipts and signatures and who holds the original, because America believes in those things even when it pretends it and doesn't. Vanessa from HR materialized at my shoulder in a glide of perfume and pastel silk, her hand warm, her voice syrup to comfort. He's nervous, she whispered, an absolution packaged as insight, and tried to pivot me toward the photo wall, away from the mic and the program, and the eyes that were now watching in threes. I smiled the way women do when we've been told we're in the way of a celebration, small, practiced, not entirely ours, and said nothing because I was seeing the night as if through tracing paper, the engraved watch, the program's strategic partner EM, the press release draft I'd skimmed earlier that somehow forgot to include my title, the seating chart that placed me with the floral arrangements and a view of the kitchen doors, and my hand, which would not stop trembling even though I was not cold. Tell me I'm overreacting, I said to Vanessa without turning. Tell me none of this is intentional. She squeezed. Big nights make everything feel bigger, she said, which is the kind of sentence designed to make you doubt yourself in public. Indignation has a clean taste when it's finally allowed in. I breathed in a 4 count, felt the sting in my lip sharpen me, and aligned my spine with the back of the chair as if posture alone could insist on reality. If my contributions could be reworded to support, if my seat could be relocated to the flowers, if my name could be floated as a partner while paper erased me, then the question was not how I felt. It was what had already been taken and whether the taking had a trail. I thought about the NDA Vanessa had pushed across a table months back with my initials highlighted, purely procedural. The black keycard that had started failing at odd hours, the way Theo from product had begun crediting the team whenever my roadmap shipped, the way my partner had started saying we when the we did not include me. My pulse slowed with each item. Rage doesn't make you credible. Precision does. I set the champagne down, found the weight of the glass surprising, and lifted the program again to study the fine print. In their acknowledgments, in a line almost ornamental, a clause number wrote beside my initials, See Schedule of Ownership, Section D. I had never been shown a Section D. I had been told there was no space for me on any schedule because we're keeping the cap table clean to signal discipline, and that the story would be cleaner if my name lived in the narrative, not the numbers. Tonight, in a luxury hotel with rented flowers and expensive light, there it was, EM, and a pointer to paperwork I had never signed. My partner laughed into the mic as if the room's awkwardness were a rumor he could charm to death, then lifted his glass again, and his watch flashed under the chandeliers. A camera flashed with it. The board chair smiled, a smile I have seen in front of judges. The quartet breathed. The air carried the familiar chill of over-conditioned rooms where money feels most comfortable. The CFO rose from his chair, extended a steady hand to me as if greeting a peer, asked for the red folder, and said into the mic, Before dessert, we should read the ownership schedule. The CFO's hand was cool and deliberate when it closed over mine, and his voice carried the kind of neutral authority that makes a room remember its obligations as he said, Per SEC guidance, we honor contributors. And the ballroom's chatter collapsed into a hush that sounded like a verdict taking its seat. He released my hand without flourish and reached for the crimson folder the coordinator had been guarding like a centerpiece, its spine embossed with the company crest as if governance were a luxury good. Tabs rose like flags, a through F in neat laminated steps, and when he opened to the index, I saw my initials printed with the same unbothered font as every director on the page. The percentage beside my name was not ceremonial. It had weight, the kind that changes votes and voices, and what people call you when they introduce you. For one suspended second, I felt the strangest split, humiliation cooling into a sharp, usable calm, as if my nervous system understood I had crossed from gossip to evidence, and from anecdote to paper. The quartet's final chord hung unresolved behind us, and somewhere near the back, a server halted mid-pour, the champagne thread quivering like the glass had inside my hand 5 minutes earlier. Across the head table, his grin stalled at the corners first, a glitch in the performance that reached his eyes a beat later. The board chair watched the expression fade with the attention of someone who has seen expensive things unravel in public and prefers it happen quietly. He lifted his napkin and placed it just so, as if symmetry could manage volatility. I had the petty impulse to mirror him, but I let it pass and studied the page. Pagination hiccuped, B7 jumped to B9, and under Section D a reference line named a Founder's Services Agreement I had never signed, an agreement I had been told did not exist because our story is cleaner without co-founder complications. I felt Vanessa shift beside me before she spoke, and the shift told the truth first. Her smile arrived an instant too late. Clerical error, he murmured, not to the room, not to the board, but to me, the practiced undertone couples use when they intend to move past the subject in front of witnesses. His foot began that old staccato under the table, heel to toe in a pattern I used to mistake for restless brilliance, and had since learned to translate as rehearsal for a lie. The CFO didn't look up. He traced a fingertip along the margin where tiny clause codes lived like coordinates, and when I glanced down at the program still anchored by my place setting, the fine print mirrored those codes exactly, a breadcrumb I should have noticed earlier if I hadn't been busy. Surviving the toast, laughter, which had been the currency of the evening, deflated into the kind of thin exhalations people make when they are waiting to see who will be asked to explain themselves. Phones lifted, not brazenly, but with that corporate etiquette that pretends documentation is rude only when you catch it happening. A camera on a shoulder rig drifted closer from the media row. The quartet found their measure and then lost it again, a bow catching a string with an audible scrape that made 3 investors flinch in tandem. I understood suddenly, viscerally, how rooms like this decide the story. They align along the safest explanation available and call it mature. The CFO cleared his throat and asked operations to project Section D. The screen breathed to life above the dais with the gentle arrogance of Hotel AV, and the image snapped crisp. A clause naming my role in the development of the roadmap IP, a vesting schedule keyed to milestones I recognized because I had stayed late to hit them. My partner leaned toward the mic with that preemptive chuckle men use to amortize bad facts. Looks like someone fat-fingered a date, he said, and when no one laughed, he doubled down. Happens all the time in fast growth. I watched the board chair fold his hands, a signal I had come to read as proceed. The CFO turned the page. Section D referenced an appended Founders Services Agreement, D3, detailing contribution credits and transfer restrictions. The pagination skipped again. Where D3 should have been, D4 stared back with a staple scar and a faint notch of torn fiber. A current moved through the room, not loud, but decisive, as if air itself had rearranged its molecules around a missing truth. We'll need D3, the CFO said. An AT confirmed the packet scanned earlier was complete when it left the office. The board chair's gaze drifted to my partner's jacket pocket as if expectation could make paper materialize. Vanessa tried the soft landing. It's a hotel print. Collators misbehave, she said, fingers already lifting her phone, eyes flicking toward me with that managerial warmth that is meant to recruit you into your own erasure. Theo, 2 tables over, performed concern to the nearest director with a hand on his heart and a mouthing of unbelievable, and I catalogued each gesture like evidence bags laid out on a long white table. The CFO, still neutral, still crisp, asked the AV lead to switch inputs. The projector accepted a new source, and a document filled the screen with my initials in the witness field and an execution date that sat on the line like a dare. Please confirm your signature, the CFO said, the cursor circling my initials while the date glared in 16-point font. The exact night I was admitted to the ER, the exact hour I could prove I wasn't anywhere near a boardroom. I was admitted at 9:43 p.m. that night, I said, not loudly, but with the kind of clarity that cuts through softing. Music, and somewhere near the back, a server's tray tipped just enough for silverware to scatter across the carpet like punctuation, the startled clatter ricocheting up to the chandeliers, while the projector held my initials against a date that did not belong to me. The room had the posture of disbelief, shoulders half raised, breath suspended, faces arranging themselves into the expressions people wear when they are deciding what kind of story they will tolerate. I lifted my phone and called up the photo I did not enjoy taking but had learned to keep. The plastic hospital wristband wrapped around my skin, the barcode sharp, the admission timestamp bright enough to argue for itself. I walked a few steps toward the AV cart, asked the tech to mirror, and watched the wide screen abandon my forged signature for the sterile certainty of triage. The band number matched the medical portal, the timestamp aligned with an automated text to my mother that still lived in my archive, and the pharmacy receipt showed a post-midnight fill that ran like a train schedule through the next morning. Vanessa, with HR's benevolent patience, offered the gentle fiction that dates blur during onboarding, as if corporate paperwork had wandered into the night and mistaken an emergency room for a conference room. She smiled like the solution to discomfort is smaller feelings. I was done with smaller feelings. Humiliation had already snapped into indignation at the toast. Now indignation matured into something steadier, something that could be sworn. I scrolled to my calendar from that week, and to the guest Wi-Fi login the hotel had texted me at 5:02 p.m. today, then to a card reader alert I'd screenshotted earlier, when the black keycard in my clutch failed to open the private boardroom, because, the concierge said, access has been updated for tonight's event. Access updated, as if proximity to fax were a privilege that could be toggled. The CFO watched the screen without commentary and asked the AV lead to split the display so the wristband timestamp, pharmacy time, and calendar blocks could sit beside the projected signature like incompatible witness statements made to the same officer. He, my partner, leaned toward me with that voice only I was supposed to hear. "Let's not make a scene," he said, as if the scene had not already been staged for weeks, as if the dressing were mine. Theo chose text over courage. "Don't make a scene. I'll smooth things," sliding from his table toward the board with a conciliatory expression he wears when selling other people's ideas as consensus. The message bloomed blue on my screen, and I felt a sudden mercy for the part of me that used to value predictability in friends over integrity in them. I typed back nothing. I let silence deliver my answer. When people tell you who they are in high-stakes rooms, you believe them faster. The CFO, who had not flinched at any of this, asked if there were any irregular financial acknowledgments tied to the disputed paperwork. It was a bland sentence that laid a path to a sharper one. I opened my email and searched my name plus an LLC I had half noticed months ago in a vendor list and dismissed as coincidence because the middle name was misspelled the way strangers miss it when they copy it from a badge. The wire transfer receipt appeared, a modest amount meant to look like a stipend for consulting, but keyed to a memo line referencing founder advisory and dated 2 days after the whiteboard session, where he had promised equity at 712. The CFO stepped closer to read the letters, pointed once, middle name wrong, and said nothing else, because anomalies do better work when you let the room discover them. Vanessa went brisk. Small business shells are common in pre-IPO stages, she said, arranging her tone into the confident plainness of someone laundering doubt with industry jargon. Theo, now close enough to breathe the board's air, offered his mediation services to no one in particular, the kind of interjection that sounds helpful until you trace the outcome and realize it sends truth to committee. The board chair asked operations to display the cap table excerpt again, and when the page expanded, I saw what my instincts had been trying to warn me about since the CFO mentioned appendices. The numbering skipped. I stepped closer. B7 to B9, then under D the reference to a founder's services agreement, D3, kept pointing at a place the packet refused to show. Anger arrived not hot but cold, a coolant that let me think. I looked at the staple line along the left margin. The faint channel paper remembers when metal has held it, and the notch near the top where a hurried hand had tugged and torn. The projector's resolution was high enough to render fiber, high enough to show absence as presence. I remembered the way the black key card had blinked red earlier, remembered the concierge's neutral apology, remembered the press release draft where my title didn't make it past story. Remembered the program's dainty clause code that matched the schedule down to its sub-paragraph. I felt my breath lengthen as the pattern settled into something that no longer required my feelings to explain it. The CFO's neutrality never cracked, but his diction sharpened by a millimeter, just enough for the room to feel the shift from reception to inquiry. He asked the operations manager when the packet left the office, asked IT when the scan had been captured, asked the coordinator who touched the folder upon arrival, asked the AV team whether a different print job had been run on the same machine in the hotel's business center within the last 2 hours. Each answer settled like a stone on a taut surface. Somewhere in the back, the quartet abandoned pretense and lowered their bows entirely. "We are missing Schedule D3, the CFO said at last, letting the syllables land like a gavel, and he turned the folder so the camera could find the bald line where staples used to be, then lifted his gaze and asked the room, no longer theoretical, no longer polite, who removed it, while the projector magnified the torn edge until the absence looked as large as the lie. The card at my place is a small masterpiece of manners, thick creamstock ink that looks hand-poured, and in its elegant calligraphy it demotes me to +1, even though the press release draft on the PR table across the room names me strategic lead, and the contradiction lands not as a typo but as choreography, a choice with a smile drawn over it. I don't pretend seating is neutral. In rooms like this, chairs are of policy. My setting has a perfect view of peonies and the swinging kitchen doors, which sigh open to reveal servers in motion and close to swallow them again, as if the back of house were a tide and I were meant to keep time to it. The board side is a world away, anchored by the river view, where decisions will acquire the dignity of scenery the way verdicts acquire the dignity of robes. From here, I can watch the power arc around the head table and skip my row like a missed syllable. It is a placement that says, "We value your presence, not your vote," and the message fits too neatly against the toast that dressed me as an accessory, and the schedule that printed my initials while trying to pretend they were ornamental. Humiliation snaps back into indignation, cleaner now, because when disrespect repeats, it becomes data. Vanessa slides into the empty chair at my left with the lightness of someone who practices entrances. When she opens her laptop, a sticker flashes on the lid for a split second before the screen angles away. 3 letters in a monogram style I have stared at on a wire receipt, the same shell LLC with my middle name misspelled, the same inexpensive camouflage that meant to pass as harmless. The recognition is not thunder, it is a click. She glances up and sees my eyes on the sticker, and for a breath, her expression shows something like irritation that I noticed. Then the smile resumes its corporate temperature. "You're not in a drafty spot, are you?" she asks, as if the only climate I could be feeling is air-conditioned. "I'm warm enough," I say, because there are different kinds of weather. Theo materializes with timing that would impress stage managers, one hand pressed to his chest in a pantomime of sincerity. "This woman," he announces to the director from ops across the table, "is the reason we pulled the quarter out of a tailspin. Endless support." The word lands like a thumb, pushing me down into a seat I didn't choose. Support is what chairs do. Leadership is where chairs are placed. I let a beat pass to watch the small nods bloom, because groupthink looks like agreement when you adjust the lighting. "Support is useful," I say, "and it has a direction." Theo's smile drains a shade. He pivots, feigning celebration, and pours champagne toward my glass until the bubble crown licks the rim. "To composure under pressure," he says, which is a lovely way to say, "Don't escalate while I make you smaller." Knives clink softly as a server resets a place where a guest has drifted off for a phone call. A violinist retunes with a shy scraping sound that threads the room and finds my nerve endings. The quartet tries a run and abandons it. A photographer crouches, rises, resets the shot. At the head table, he laughs too loudly at something the board chair hasn't finished saying, and the laugh bends in the middle. The PR lead floats by with a stack of folders, and I catch the top page enough to read a line the way you read a stranger's text on a train. Narrative, not numbers. Story, not schedule. It is the gentlest theft, the kind dressed in compliments. I steady my hands on the linen, feel the faint tooth of the cloth, and think about all the times I was trained to measure my reactions to the room instead of measuring the room against the facts. A motion at the periphery pulls my eyes. The CFO's deputy, a woman whose calm is the kind that can carry trouble without spilling it, steps out from the technical table with a small black case. She does not head for the head table. She comes straight to me, and something in the geometry of that path rearranges 3 conversations mid-sentence. People sense when a trajectory has meaning. Heads tilt toward the breeze. Before she reaches me, Vanessa places a hand on my forearm and gives it a pressure that reads as friendship if you are generous and as warning if you are paying attention. "No surprises," she says lightly, as if we are conspiring against chaos together. I look at the sticker again, those 3 letters pretending to be decoration, and I think of the black key card that would not open the boardroom door earlier. Access updated, the neat way erasure is implemented as a setting. Anxiety does what it wants to do in a body. It climbs. But I have learned to hand it tasks. Count the forks. Note who forgets to say my title. Notice which investors are checking their phones against a private thread that tells them what opinion to have. Remember that every humiliation in this room is an asset once you stop asking it to be a secret. The deputy arrives. Up close, the case is not a case. It is a drive sleeve with a diagonal scrape across one corner that makes it look like a match struck without catching. She keeps her voice pitched for my row alone, respectful of the theater of proximity. Her expression is not pity, not team, not PR, just a practiced neutrality of people who spend their days carrying proofs between those who want to hide them and those who need to see them. "Miss E.M., she says, using my initials as if to remind the room that I exist on paper. "Operations asked me to deliver this to you." I take the USB, and it is heavier than it looks, as if evidence itself has density. Theo leans in a shade too close, as if a shoulder could claim jurisdiction. "We should loop comms," he murmurs. Vanessa's fingers leave my arm and return to her keyboard. The sticker stares blandly. The kitchen doors breathe in and out. The peonies look like wealth pretending to be natural. "You'll want to watch this in 5 minutes," the deputy adds, eyes steady on mine, and the scratch corner catches the chandelier light like a spark that hasn't decided where to land yet. In the powder room mirror, the foundation hides a small tremor my bones refuse to deny, and when I plug the scratch corner USB into the vanity TV, still looping an ad for the spa and a time-lapse of the river, the screen jolts, blinks twice, and replaces hotel perfection with a whiteboard crowded by my handwriting, my voice, and the afternoon we decided what value looked like when it grew up. The camera is set low, angled from the credenza where we stack seltzer and dry erase markers. It sees me standing by the board with my sleeves pushed past my elbows, talking through the architecture like a map maker who has finally found the coastline. I hear the cadence I use when I have to carry doubt and momentum at once. Listen, then decide. And I watch a room full of faces tracking the path from prototype to product, from beta to revenue, from nice to have to we should build a runway for this now. He is there, leaning in the doorway with that theatrical casual he saves for days when he needs plausible deniability in case the idea fails. His voice arrives on the mic, clear as crystal stemware. If EM's IP underpins the roadmap, she gets founder-level credit and equity tied to the milestones. We'll document it. It is not a murmur. It is not a joke. It is a sentence the room could have repeated if a judge asked them to. I feel my own breath sync with the recording. A strange double exposure, present me steadying the tremor, past me steadying the room, and I watch the whiteboard marker in my hand underline the hinge point between features and moat. There's a clock on the back wall above the kitchenette, the kind bought in bulk, practical and indifferent, and its hands climb towards 7 when 12. When they kiss, the second hand stutters and moves on, and I think of the engraving on his watch flashing under chandeliers downstairs, the promise minted into metal, the minute that has haunted my sense of fairness ever since. Awe and recognition move through me together like two halves of the same tide. Awe at how clean truth sounds when it's recorded without audience manipulation. Recognition that my body wasn't lying to me when it bristled at the narrative that made me ornamental. I let the audio play through a moment where Theo jumps in to convert excitement into next steps. I hear myself delegate, not defer. I see heads nod at the allocation sentence again. A silent vote everyone keeps. Pretending never happened. The image wobbles. Someone adjusts the tripod and then returns to sharp. The footage cuts to a table shot. The lens now inches above the surface where a stack of drafts sits under a paperweight shaped like the company logo. A hand, his, slides a packet free, and the camera, almost nosy, leans closer as if its curiosity had a heart. The red lines glow like arteries under hospital lights. Clauses for attribution, vesting tied to product milestones, a witness field waiting for initials that belong to one person only. A timestamp in the footer clicks forward by a few minutes, but the stylus strokes in the margin look heavier than the notes in the earlier version, angrier in the angles, and when the page turns, my initials appear beside a date that doesn't belong to my life. Someone has added me to a document I hadn't touched after I left for a pharmacy run by the ER. That night, the trail has been edited the way people edit a story when they need to keep the protagonist but remove her agency. The clip pauses on the mismatch long enough for anyone who pretends to be confused to feel implicated. I taste the cool arrival of moral courage, not the cinematic blast, the steadying one, and I realize I am past asking permission to exist in the record. The next clip is almost comical in its carelessness. Whoever framed it forgot that glass reflects more than aesthetics. We're back in the whiteboard room. The camera points toward the front, but a narrow panel of the interior window acts like a second screen. In the reflection, Vanessa stands close to me, palm up with a fresh marker I prefer because there's a fine tip that doesn't smear on glossy paint. "Don't put that in email," she says, gentle as if protecting me from future headaches, and the reflection preserves the sentence the way a pond holds the sky. On the main frame, I nod, because at the time I thought she meant save time, stay focused, less clutter. In the reflected strip, I see her angle toward him by the credenza a minute later, see her mouth a word that looks like clean. See the way my partner's shoulders relax when she taps the stack of drafts with a rehearsal that now feels like muscle memory. I wanted to believe my shiver at the toast was petty. The mirror explains it was memory. Just when I expect the screen to go black and spit me back to advertisements for signature cocktails, the final clip loads with the intimacy of a confession. The camera sits at elbow height beside the printer as pages feed out, warm and obedient, into the tray. The packet looks identical to the one on the ballroom projector. Same cover, same spine, same tabs, seducing the eye into thinking order means truth. Hands enter the frame, and I don't need audio to identify the knuckles. I know the watch band. He flips through to section D, and because the camera is close, the microphone picks up the small, guilty music of staples flexing. One quick motion, practiced, and enough to look harmless, and a sheet labeled D3 lifts free. He does not hesitate. He folds the page once, twice, smooths the crease on his thigh, and slides it into his jacket as if tucking in a note he intends to read in private and burn later, while the rest of the document stacks neatly back together like a mouth disguising a missing tooth. The freeze frame catches his hand mid-pocket, the title Schedule D3 clean in the corner, and in the reflected glass behind him, my own outline turns toward the boardroom door, as if I could already feel the exact piece of paper that would go missing when the vote arrived. When I step back into the ballroom, he angles his jaw toward the cameras, kisses my cheek for the flash, and in the half-inch between skin and smile, he whispers, "Stop this or we both lose," as if my dignity were a negotiable instrument he could discount on demand. The photographers love choreography that reads as devotion, so he holds me in a frame that could sell philanthropy, while his fingertips press a caution into my shoulder that would never pass compliance if someone wrote it down. I keep my face neutral for the lenses and study the room with the long view that humiliation has granted me. PR staging the step and repeat, investors in a shoulder-to-shoulder huddle pretending to talk about weather, the board chair pretending not to triage outcomes. I feel the steadiness that followed the USB footage harden into resolve. If the price of safety is agreeing to be ornamental, then the bargain was always theft. Losing comfort is cheaper than losing myself, and the calculation takes exactly one breath. The CFO approaches with the calm of a physician who has seen worse and needs the patient upright. He requests a brief sidebar. The board chair nods without theatrics, and legal counsel appears with a leather folio, eyes already scanning the room for the nearest flat surface that could count as a desk. We move as a small, deliberate procession to the anteroom, the quartet's unresolved chord trailing us like a question that refuses to fade. Inside, the air is cooler, the lighting less forgiving, the furniture designed for quiet agreements no one will admit to later. A carafe sweats on a side table. A legal pad waits with a capped pen. The silence acquires structure. 5 minutes, the board chair says from the threshold, which is 7 lifetimes in a room where governance is oxygen. Legal sets the folio down, and when the crimson folder joins it, a courier slip peeks from the inside pocket, half hidden under tabbed pages. My valet ticket, tucked in my clutch since arrival, has been a meaningless number until this second, when its digits rhyme with the courier record so perfectly it might as well be a lyric. I place the ticket beside the slip. The match is not approximate. Chain of custody, I think. The phrase clicking into place like a magazine into a well-maintained lock. Whatever moved tonight did not travel only through printers and pockets. It caught a ride under the hotel's canopy, tagged for speed. The CFO sees it the same instant I do, and makes the smallest mark on the legal pad, a private breadcrumb for 5 minutes from now. PR slips in late, flanked by a junior who looks like a mirror kept for emergencies, her tone silky with the unearned intimacy of we. She offers a narrative like a life raft. "We can tell your love story," she says, "two ambitious people balancing greatness and grace, and we can correct the record without making this about equity, because America is tired of money drama and wants romance with stakes." Her smile is calibrated for a magazine cover. Her eyes search my face for the angle that will keep the brand's multiple audiences from turning away. "Trade the equity angle for brand optics," she says, as if equity were garnish and optics were dinner. I watch the way legal's jaw tightens at the phrase trade and feel the thankful flicker of a boundary holding. "Governance is not a subplot," I say, and hear my voice choose nouns again. Ratify, rescind, authenticate, disclose, each word a rung on a ladder out of the narrative I did not write. Somewhere down the hall, the ballroom applause restarts for a joke I did not hear, and in the quiet between thunder and echo, I notice his watch in the reflection of the anteroom glass. The minute hand, misaligned all night at 7 notso's edge, hops forward to 7:13, as if admitting that time will not wait for anyone's preferred version. The jump feels like a small loosening inside my ribs. He is negotiating with optics. I am negotiating with facts. Only one of those contracts has an enforcement mechanism beyond shame. "If we're speaking to press," legal says, "we will be precise. No adjectives, only verifiable chronology." I nod, because righteous anger can carry you into defamation if you decorate it. I choose the discipline of evidence over the sugar rush of a monologue that would feel good and cost more than it pays. The CFO reviews the immediate choices with a triage that respects time. Recover D3 from the source we watched on the USB. Authenticate chain of custody for the packet. Freeze access to hotel printers and collect their job logs. Preserve the AV recordings. Schedule a board motion on governance impact. And, if necessary, notify regulators that a material misstatement might have been prepared for public consumption. PR opens her mouth to argue for gentle words. Legal closes it with a look that means we all remember headlines and how they age. I pull the valet ticket back into my clutch, slide my phone into airplane mode for the first time tonight, and understand that I have crossed out of the private warnings era and into the public record era. This is the part of the American story where we stop hoping a good man will fix it quietly and start writing minutes. He knocks once and leans into the doorway like a husband in a hospital drama, graveling his voice into concern. "Can we take a breath, please?" he asks, inviting the room to call me emotional so it can call him reasonable. The CFO does not indulge the performance. He gestures to legal instead. "We're taking facts," he says, and the sentence is a scalpel. My partner's eyes flick to my hands, searching for tremor. They find steadiness and do not know what to do with it. Behind his shoulder, the ballroom's light spills in a ribbon across the carpet, as if the party were trying to reclaim us by glow alone. The doorknob turns wider, and before he can frame another plea, a woman steps through with a recorder I recognize from a previous expose, her press badge swinging, and when the CFO greets her by name and says, "Thank you for coming on short notice," I understand he invited the journalist to witness whatever comes next. The journalist sets a small black recorder between the water glasses, clicks it alive, and asks, "Do you authorize me to use what you're about to say on the record?" And I feel the room tighten the way honesty tightens a dress. No stretch left, just seams that will either hold or split where the lie lives. I say yes. I say my full name. I say I authorize. The words come out steady, not because I'm fearless, but because the USB gave me back my spine. She recites the time and place for the audio and nods once in that professional way that means proceed. I start where the story actually begins, not where anyone prefers it to. The roadmap session in the whiteboard room, sleeves shoved past my elbows, the path from prototype to moat, his voice on the recording promising founder-level credit and equity tied to the milestones because my IP underpinned the thing that now glitters on the investor slides. I state the date. I state the time stamped on the wall clock at 7:12. I state the exact phrasing, "We'll document it." And the journalist raises a finger to mark emphasis on her notebook. Then I walk her through the night. The paperwork says I signed what I didn't. My ER admission at 9:43 p.m., the pharmacy timestamp that follows, the hospital portal that will satisfy anyone who needs to see a database. She asks for copies. Legal says preserved. The CFO says already mirrored. I watch the recorder's red light blink like a metronome pacing a reckoning. I turn to the edits. I describe the red-line documents, the heavier stylus pressure that arrived after the timestamp rolled forward, the mismatch in my initials that looks right until you examine how I cross the middle letter when I'm tired. She asks whether anyone discouraged me from email. I tell her about the mirror, about Vanessa's hand offering a marker, and the sentence "Don't put that in email" preserved in glass. I keep my voice even because righteous anger should never sound like a script. The journalist's eyes flick from me to Vanessa and back, not accusatory, not exonerating, just weighing credibility the way America still does, on tone, detail, and whether you can sit inside your facts without decoration. The breadcrumb I almost missed becomes the hinge. I hold up my phone and show the calendar invite for document harmonization, scheduled by Vanessa exactly 1 hour after my ER admission. The title is dull enough to pass 1,000 inboxes a day. The timing is loud enough to carry through a wall. The journalist asks for the invite header. I enlarge it. She copies the UID and whispers it back to confirm. Legal's pen moves in lean strokes. The CFO makes another small mark in the margin that means chain. In my periphery, he shifts his weight like a man discovering the floor plan has changed. Counterpressure arrives in Kashmir. He steps forward into the circle of our quiet with a voice tuned to reasonableness and says the pledge to the hospital wing, 7 figures and a plaque, is contingent on a stable evening, that donors don't like circus, that headlines distract nurses from patients, and some of those patients are children, and surely we don't want to end the night by hurting children. It is the ugliest leverage because it sounds like benevolence. The journalist does not blink. Are you conditioning philanthropic commitments on a governance outcome? She asks, voice professional as a ruler. He retreats into adjectives. We're asking for goodwill, he says. The CFO doesn't give him the cover. We won't launder governance with charity, he says, spine made of statute. And the sentence puts a wall between the knight and the oldest trick in town. Theo crumbles without ceremony. He has been standing off to the side performing neutrality while texting himself into relevance, and the journalist, who has read rooms like this for a living, asks if he witnessed any representations about my role. Theo starts with a compliment about my support, and the word hangs there until he hears it and swallows. He stares at his shoes, then at Vanessa, then at me, and confesses he was told I preferred non-ownership recognition because titles were cleaner optics for couples, and he repeated that to 2 directors and a PR lead like a faithful messenger. The journalist asks who told him. He says he can't recall. His cheek twitches. Vanessa inhales through her teeth. The recorder blinks without mercy. I do not look away, not because I want a friend to fail in public, but because my life already did, quietly, in rooms like this. Legal keeps time the way conductors do when the orchestra thinks it is improvising. She confirms the packet timeline, the printer logs, the courier slip that rhymes with my valet ticket, the existence of a missing D3, and the freeze frame of a hand folding it into a jacket. She asks the journalist to hold publication for 1 hour to avoid misstatements in the rush. The journalist says she will hold nothing that endangers the truth, and the CFO says, we'll give you the board outcome itself. I can feel the last of my anxiety climb and then flatten into purpose. If narrative is a weapon, so is a minute book. Down the corridor, the quartet stumbles back into something that wants to be celebratory. The PR lead hovers in the doorway like a storm looking for a window. My partner's watch reads 7:16 now. Mine finally is moving too. Legal closes her folio with a decisive sigh of leather, glances at the board chair hovering like a shadow in the hall, and speaks in a tone that fits the weight of consequence. The board is moving to a vote to rescind or ratify the promotion tonight, she announces, and the recorder catches the sentence clean as a bell just before the door swings wider and the room's oxygen changes. The board secretary rises with the controlled calm of someone who understands the weight of procedure, opens the binder to the index and says, we cannot proceed. Schedule D3 is absent, and without it the cap table is incomplete. And the sentence lands like a break on steel, sparks visible even if we pretend not to see them. The room reshapes itself around the absence. Chairs draw closer to the table without scraping. Investors fold their arms as if holding their stakes in place. The board chair's fingers tent, as if posture could supply a missing page. I feel the old heat of shame crawl up the back of my neck and then melt away, replaced by the steadier warmth of clarity. The missing paper is not my mess to apologize for. My existence on the schedule is not a favor I must repay with silence. I reach into my clutch, find the scratched corner USB that has become a spine, and hand it to the CFO with a nod that says, let's stop narrating and start showing. He signals IT, who, with the solemnity of a medic, inserts the drive into a battery-backed laptop and mirrors it to the hotel projector. Politeness thins, attention thickens, the room leans. It starts with chain of custody. The footage loads with the timestamp watermark alive in the corner like a pulse. The whiteboard session at 7:12. The allocation promise. The red lines. The mirror where Vanessa hands a marker and advises against email. And finally the printer clip where hands flip to D3 and lift it out with a practiced ease that assumes no one is watching. Authenticate, the CFO says, and IT complies. Hash values computed, comparison logs displayed, internal checksum matching across the segments. Unaltered, IT confirms, voice steady, and I hear a sigh leave 3 bodies at once like air stepping off an elevator that arrived at the wrong floor. The board secretary notes the verification. Legal initials the margin. The journalist's recorder blinks in the periphery because truth likes witnesses. The CFO shifts the display to a forensic view most people only meet in litigation. Metadata floats onto the screen, a neat stack of fields that turn the room into a tutorial. Device ID for the printer, User session tagged to a temporary guest. Account print job queued at 4:02 p.m. Pickup within 3 minutes. IT overlays the hotel's business center map, and the cursor taps the exact machine. This is not our office equipment, the board chair says flatly, and the statement feels less like discovery than like permission for everyone to stop pretending the page evaporated. The hotel's security liaison, summoned by the event staff the moment power players started whispering about the printers, stands near the door with a folder that looks like contraband even though it is just policy. She confirms that security footage exists covering the business center and the corridor to the service elevator. The CFO asks for stills. Within a minute, the projector displays a gallery no one will be able to forget. In the first frame, Vanessa stands at the business center printer with her laptop open, the same lid sticker, the Shell LLC initials in chic script, visible under the fluorescent lights. A second frame captures her collecting the pages, palms flattening the stack the way office people do when paper matters. A third shows her handing the packet to him in the corridor, his watch band unmistakable, his smile too wide for a hallway. In the fourth, he peels back the cover and thumbs to the tabs. A fifth shows his hand at the spine, a small stutter where metal meets habit. A sixth freezes the fold that makes paper ready for a pocket. No audio, none needed. The quartet in the ballroom gives up entirely. Silence clings to the ceiling. He tries dignified denial. "This is contextless," he says. "The board packet was being prepared for readability. I often remove duplicates." Legal taps the screen where the stamp D3 sits, clear as a plate number. "Duplicates don't leave staple scars," she says, and the first real murmur rolls through the directors like a wind arriving from a better climate. Vanessa attempts corporate mercy, common pre-processing, fast growth chaos, collators misbehave, and each euphemism sounds like an older lie getting a facelift. The journalist asks, softly, whether they will be naming the Shell LLC used for the wire that misprinted my middle name. The PR lead inhales as if to spin, then exhales when the CFO raises a single palm. "We will name everything relevant," he says, composed, and the board chair nods once like he has chosen the side of oxygen. The emotional math inside me resolves. I am not the problem in this room. I am the proof. The apology I have rehearsed my whole life, sorry for being necessary, expires right here, under chandelier light that flatters everyone and forgives no one. I turn toward the directors and explain, without heat, how Schedule D3 anchors the attribution clause that ties my IP to the product's moat, how the vesting terms trigger on milestones we met, how the governance horizon changes with my percentage because independence is not just a line, it's a vote that changes the weather. I watch comprehension replace politeness. This is how American rooms move, not with sympathy, with math. The board secretary, satisfied that the packet's absence is documented and the footage authenticated, begins to frame the motion. Proceed with the vote contingent on retrieval, or table the vote and convene emergency governance review, or rescind the promotion pending investigation. The words assemble like scaffolding building their own staircase. Investors whisper toward the outcome that bleeds the least. The journalist's pen keeps pace. My partner flexes his jaw like a man bargaining with gravity. Vanessa studies the carpet as if it might open a door. Then the projector flinches, one stutter, another, and the image fractures into gray bands before collapsing into black. The house lights sag a shade. The quartet's stand lights vanish, and the ballroom inhales as someone, somewhere near the service corridor, yanks the power and throws us all into a darkness so complete it feels curated. Emergency lights bloom in soft rectangles along the ceiling like a second, sterner chandelier. The string quartet's bows hang in midair as if the music itself has been told to freeze, and near the service corridor, a maintenance tech kneels by a trip breaker where a black keycard has been jammed into the slot as neatly as a confession slid under a door. The darkness rearranges hierarchy. Without stage light, power looks like posture and breath control. People do the math of liability in their heads while they pretend to check their phones for signal. Investors calculate whether they are witnessing a governance event or a social embarrassment. The board chair counts to 3 in silence and then looks to the CFO, the way a pilot looks to instruments when the horizon disappears. I feel for the familiar weight in my clutch and close on a shape that is almost, but not quite, my card. The decoy I keep for demos, smooth and blank where a band of encoded truth should live. The real black key card, the one that failed at the private boardroom door earlier and told me access had been updated, is gone, and the absence is loud enough to hear over the air handler spooling back to life. The maintenance tech frees the jam card with needle nose pliers and hands it to security. They turn it over like a fish pulled from a dark river and tuck it into a bag that rustles with policy. He moves first, because this is the only terrain he knows. Accusation rendered as concern. She staged this, he says, voice steady enough to pass for reason. She's been angling for a spectacle since the toast. And a few heads nod, not because they believe him, but because they fear chaos more than they love truth. The journalist's recorder blinks steadily from the anteroom threshold, a small red metronome that refuses to hurry, and the sound of its tiny click feels like a hand on my back, keeping me from stepping into fury where precision is needed. I look at the maintenance tech, at the clear bag holding the jam card, at the security liaison who is already requesting the access logs for the past hour, and I hear my own voice settle in the register that has served me better than charm. Please preserve that as evidence and include chain of custody on the tag. The liaison nods. The room takes a breath. A server steadies a tray before it can advertise anyone's nerves to the floor. The CFO steadies the room by giving it work. Battery rigs, he tells IT, and 2 rolling cases appear as if conjured from the hotel's polite nothingness, extension cords coiling like tame snakes across the carpet, while the projector's small sibling blinks awake with the humility of a tool that understands its purpose. Mirror from the USB, he adds, and the scratched corner drive, already authenticated, already blessed by hash, slides into a port on the backup machine. PR moves to frame the outage as ambiance. Legal moves to intercept the urge. A handful of directors gather in a curve that reads as protection, whether or not they intend to protect me. Their shoes are suddenly audible because the carpet soundproofing has become a character in the scene. The quartet rests their bows and waits. Nothing about this wants accompaniment. While the rigs spin up, I notice something so mundane, it feels like fate has a sense of humor. On his jacket's interior lining, where the cotton has thinned from being pressed against corners of ambition, 2 faint parallel impressions sit exactly where staples would live if a packet had leaned there too long. The crimson folder on the table, its spine proud and its contents now famous, shows the same twin dimples along its edge. The match is not proof, it is choreography. But choreography, when repeated enough times, becomes handwriting, and handwriting, when read aloud, becomes a story even America will recognize as too neat. He sees my eyes on the fabric and smooths it with a palm, as if he could iron law into his lapel. The gesture reveals nothing and admits everything. Vanessa, sensing the air tilt toward consequence, starts a sentence that dies on the second syllable when the backup projector hums itself into authority. The mirrored screen returns bright and clinical, the way hospital light returns even after storms, and the USB's directory lists the files we have already seen: whiteboard session, red lines, mirror pane, printer feed. But IT has pulled a second folder from the company share entitled Addenda zum Archive, the kind most people never open because its name is boring. The cursor hesitates, then commits. A document blooms in grayscale, letterhead unmistakable, formatting clean enough to pass any casual glance. The caption calls it an IP assignment addendum, the language flavored with those verbs that move ownership from human hands to corporate entities, with an elegance that still feels like theft when you are the entity. The camera zooms. The witness field holds my initials. The e-signature box displays a stylus flourish that looks enough like my hand to convince people who want to be convinced. The date anchors itself to the night I was in the ER, like a nail through fabric. The room gathers its disbelief the way people gather dropped cutlery. Fast, apologetic, hoping no one saw the tumble. Legal asks IT for the signature audit trail and the device IDs associated with the signing event. The journalist writes one word on her pad large enough for me to read: forgery, with a question mark that is not a question. He tries a new tack and spreads his hands in a gesture borrowed from network television. We executed late-stage cleanup that protected the company, he says, as though fiduciary duty were a blanket he could drape over a body to hide the shape of harm. The board chair does not blink. Cleanup does not occur retroactively, he replies, and the emergency lights give his face a geometry I will remember when I finally sleep. On the screen, the addendum scrolls to the clause that claims my inventions as assignable to him upon mutual acknowledgement, my digital signature blinking in the corner like a counterfeit heartbeat, and the room leans in as one organism just before the file's audit log loads to show a device fingerprint I have never owned. That's not my signature, I say. In legal, already halfway there, asks IT to open the biometric pane, to surface the stylus pressure map, to pull the geolocation attached to the signing event, because if this room is going to choose between story and science, we are going to give it science with a timestamp and a pulse. The audit console expands like a patient file, graphs blooming in blue, pressure curves, stroke order, lift points where a real hand breathes between letters. Mine, captured a dozen times for access badges and prior NDAs, shows a gentle surge on the cross of the middle initial and a feathered release on the final downstroke. The addendum's version drives too hard into the first letter and drags where I never drag, a determined imitation that mistakes confidence for force. The room watches a forensic ballet most people never see unless courts are listening. Legal asks for device telemetry, and IT obliges. The signing event pings a tablet ID that isn't mine in a geolocation that doesn't belong to my life. A pin landing across town at the ER pharmacy at 10:07 p.m. The hour my prescription slip lists, and the security camera at the counter will corroborate if anyone wants to buy popcorn, and watch me exist somewhere other than this addendum's fiction. I feel the strangest braid inside, a relief that I am not crazy, a grief that I was targeted, a low, clean anger that prefers nouns to adjectives. The witness field, projected in clinical grayscale, lists Theo's name as if friendship were a stamp you apply to paperwork to make it pass. He stares at his hands the way people do when they're trying to find innocence in their palms, as if good intentions can be read like lines. The journalist writes witness in a block that looks like a headline. PR inches toward a narrative about process gaps and fast-moving teams, and legal shuts the door with a glance that says, "Not tonight, not with this paper, not with this data." The CFO asks gently, as if offering dignity on a tray, "Theo, did you witness this signature?" The word witness is heavy enough to leave a mark. He looks at Vanessa and then at me, and whatever performance he'd been rehearsing dissolves in the light of a room that finally refuses to pretend. He admits he signed the witness field later, not in the room, not beside my hand, after Vanessa told him we were doing routine cleanup, after she assured him I preferred non-ownership recognition, because equity would complicate optics, after she wrapped a lie in the tissue paper of kindness and tied it with a ribbon named we. The admission doesn't roar, it arrives like weather, undeniable once you step outside. The board chair lets out a long breath through his nose, the kind men trained in composure allow themselves when something expensive breaks. Vanessa tries the word misunderstanding. Legal counters with misrepresentation. The journalist's recorder blinks because the truth needs a witness too. I speak without flourish, because flourish is bait and we're past bait. I say I understand how clerical can be weaponized, how signatures become choreography when there's a bonus tied to the outcome, how ordinary words, cleanup, harmonization, optics, can be levers if you want them to move the wrong thing. I say I will not apologize for being necessary, that the product exists because I insisted on a moat when presentation decks preferred a rainbow, that attribution isn't vanity in a market that buys only what it can measure. I watch a director who had been smiling at nothing all night stop smiling. I watch another, who hadn't looked at me at all, meet my eyes and hold them. The quartet stays quiet, their bows, resting, look like commas in a sentence that needed to pause before the verb. Oit scrolls to the addendum's mutual acknowledgement clause, the one that tries to smuggle consent in as if the word mutual were an incantation that makes theft polite. The stylus audit prints beside it, my pressure map like a heartbeat next to the addendum's aggressive scrawl, 2 EKGs telling incompatible stories. Legal asks if the tablet ID can be tied to a user. IT nods and traces it to a loaner unit assigned to executive ops, a bucket where accountability goes to misplace its name. The security liaison, still holding the bagged black key card, radios for the hotel pharmacy footage. It will take time. It will arrive. It will show fluorescent lights and my tired face and the exact sweater I am wearing now because the night didn't allow costume changes. He tries benevolence one more time, the counterfeit that worked for years. We were protecting you, he says, from the scrutiny that comes with ownership. And the sentence lands like a hand on a steering wheel that isn't his. I don't raise my voice. Ownership is scrutiny, I say, and my work survived it long before your promotion dinner needed a fairy tale. The board chair tilts toward legal. The CFO keeps his gaze fixed on the facts like a man steering by stars. From the ballroom doors, 2 members of hotel security step in with the careful calm of people carrying something fragile enough to change a night. One holds a small cream envelope stamped with the valet logo, the sort of stationery that usually hides tip money or a claim ticket. The other reads from a note, found in the valet drop, addressed to EM, delivered per request to board. The envelope has the weight of folded paper that has been folded again. Legal breaks the seal with a pen cap to preserve prints and slides a single page free. Even before it opens, I know the feel. Thicker stock, a staple shadow near the edge, the whisper of torn fiber like a scar you can find in the dark. It's Schedule D3, edges ragged where metal once lived, and across the margin in a hand I know as well as my own is a line written in ink that doesn't shake. 712 was always yours. The CFO holds the page like evidence rescued from a fire and says, "Read it." And when I begin, steadier than I expected, the clause names me for what the roadmap made me, founder-level vesting for the IP, effective the day of the whiteboard session at 712, no caveats, no romance, just terms. I don't embellish. I read the paragraph that ties attribution to milestones already met, the percentage that is not decorative but governing, the transfer restrictions that keep my work from being laundered through anyone else's pocket. The language is dry in the way rain is dry when it arrives in a desert. The room drinks it anyway. I trace each subclause, the way vesting accelerates on acquisition only if my contribution is recognized on the cap table, the way control provisions rebalance board voting thresholds by a hair that happens to be the difference between rubber stamp and oversight. I read the witness line and the date, both aligned to the whiteboard afternoon the USB remembered without flattery. I do not turn toward him as I read, but the journalist's camera catches what I knew it would, the engraved watch on his wrist stuttering at 7:12, as if time itself were refusing to cosplay as his alibi 1 second longer. The hum that rises isn't applause, it's comprehension. Directors who prefer adjectives only when they modify EBITDA lean forward because numbers are finally talking in a dialect they respect. Legal stands beside the screen and points, with a capped pen, to the staple shadows that match the torn edge of the page in my hand, to the pagination that leaps where someone meant it to pass unnoticed, to the mutual acknowledgement. Clause in the forged addendum that now reads like a forged permission slip beside the real thing. The CFO asks IDT to overlay the chain of custody path, printer, corridor, jacket, valet drop, and then to freeze on the note that rode with the page, 712 was always yours. No one asks whose handwriting it is. The room knows and also understands that knowing is less important than what the sentence restores. I keep reading. The cap table addendum that flows from D3 reassigns a sliver here, a sliver there, and the math does what math does when it's honest. It changes the weather. Where a simple majority once let a charming narrative skate past governance, independence now requires someone like me to be in the room, vote in hand, history intact. I reach the line that ties promotion to the amended table, acknowledge my contribution and proceed, or fail to acknowledge and trigger a for-cause review. And I watch the board chair's face acquire that court day stillness I saw earlier, the expression of a person aware that precedent is about to be born in public. The journalist doesn't interrupt. She doesn't have to. Her recorder catches every syllable with the appetite of a document that knows it will be quoted later without needing adjectives. Shame has nowhere left to live, and with its eviction comes a clarity that feels like a light turned on in a room I thought I knew. I say out loud, for the record, that I won't trade equity for optics, won't accept an advisory title like a consolation corsage, won't let the story collapse back into a love letter when the ledger is what needs reading. I say my work is not a rumor. I say the product ships because I refuse to put mode on the slide as clip art. I say calmly that my name on this schedule is not a gift. The PR lead takes a half step toward the aisle and stops when legal's hand rises an inch, a traffic light for spin. The CFO thanks me and moves us to mechanics because justice without mechanics is wishful thinking. He proposes two paths with the simplicity of a surgeon laying out instruments. The board ratifies the promotion conditional on amending the cap table to include my founder level allocation as articulated in D3 and on initiating a governance review of document handling. Or the board rescinds the promotion for cause, names interim leadership, and refers any forgery questions to outside counsel and, if appropriate, to regulators. No one mistakes the seriousness of those nouns. The investors look at their shoes not to hide, but to calculate. The directors look at one another not for permission, but to count. The journalist writes the options on a single line, as if to prepare the headline for whichever spine the board selects. He tries for charm, and the emergency lights make the attempt look like theater left on after the audience went home. "We built this together," he says, hands open, voice tuned to reasonable, as if plural pronouns can amortize singular misdeeds. The watch on his wrist ticks once, then hesitates, then gives up the performance and sits at 7:12 like a confession engraved in steel. Vanessa's smile finds no purchase. Theo's breath fogs the space in front of him like a boy in winter realizing boundaries aren't weather. The PR lead studies her heels. The board chair lifts his hand and the hum quiets with the obedience of a school assembly. "We will vote," he says, and the secretary prepares the roll. Legal places two cards on the table, ratify, amend, and rescind for cause, because even clarity needs labels when the night is long. My throat wants to tighten and does not. I glance at the envelope that delivered D3, at the crease that will never smooth entirely, at the handwriting that returned my own minutes to me, and I think about the girl who learned to make herself small, to fit in rooms that were never built with her in mind, and how she's not invited back after tonight. Before the first card is raised, he steps to the mic and says, with a smile practiced for television, "If I go down, she goes with me." He does not bother with subtlety. He breathes into the microphone and announces a fabricated allegation wrapped in the language of concern, and I answer without trembling, laying out verifiable records, witness statements, and the journalist's authenticated footage until the lie can't find oxygen in a room now trained to breathe facts. I begin with the pharmacy geolocation at 10:07 p.m., slide to the hospital portal with my 9:43 p.m. admission, and park on the stylus pressure map that shows a hand impersonating mine by pressing where I feather and dragging where I lift. Legal cues the printer logs and the corridor stills. IT displays the hash that matched the USB. The journalist nods once to confirm chain of custody in her notes because she knows how headlines need spines. He tries to lace the allegation with old affection. We were protecting her from scrutiny. But the board has heard that fairy tale and watched the wolf step out of costume. And in the silence after my last timestamp, I feel the room adopt the discipline I've been begging for since the toast. Nouns over adjectives, evidence over sympathy, governance over gossip. The board chair speaks without embroidery. He reads the motion to rescind for cause, names the investigation scope, and aligns it to policies he can quote from memory because he has been waiting years to do this properly in a room that would let him. The vote is not dramatic. It's clean. Cards rise, rescind for cause, and the secretary records the tally while the CFO prepares the instruments that make outcome real. He executes an invalidation of the forged addendum, cites the audit trail, and orders the deactivation of the loaner tablet profile used to sign my name into someone else's ledger. HR leadership is placed on leave pending investigation. Vanessa's badge pings red when security collects it, and she hands over her laptop with a composure that looks rehearsed for court. I do not gloat. I steady my hands on the table and let the room decide what kind of place it wants to be. Public accountability follows with the ruthlessness of a checklist. The press release is revised in real time. The promotion rescinded, interim leadership named, governance review launched, and me, EM, credited for the roadmap IP with equity restored per Schedule D3. The PR lead reads the new language aloud, and for once, the nouns do not flinch. Attribution, vesting, investigation, compliance. The journalist asks two clarifying questions designed to survive litigation. Legal answers with citations. The CFO adds that any implicated documents will be forwarded to outside counsel and regulators without euphemism. I watched the cameras capture the sentence I once would have begged for behind closed doors. Tonight it arrives in a ballroom because that is where the lie wanted its stage. After the vote, the board offers me a title as if titles were bandages. I feel the reflex to say yes, the way women are trained to translate survival into gratitude, and then I recognize the old trap dressed in a new ribbon. I decline the hastily minted role that would park me under someone's narrative and take the seat I asked for the minute I could breathe. The Product Advisory Council with voting rights, direct line to governance, power that writes minutes instead of press quotes. The board chair's expression warms by 1 degree into respect. The CFO's mouth tips at the corner in what passes for approval among people who count truth in basis points. Theo approaches with a sorry strangled by shame. I tell him to cooperate fully with outside counsel, to tell the truth in long sentences, to learn how integrity sounds when it isn't auditioning. The room exhales like weather breaking. Servers reappear, lights lift, and the string quartet finds a piece that knows how to close an evening without lying about what happened in it. I reach for the champagne I abandoned at the beginning of all this, and for the first time tonight the flute doesn't vibrate. My hand has finally stopped auditioning for other people's comfort. On my wrist, a watch I bought for myself, no engraving, no myth, waits for a decision I know I owe only to me. I wind the crown, set the hands to 7:12, and then, deliberately gently, let the mine at hand tick forward to 7:13. The click is small and entire. Somewhere behind me his engraved watch refuses to move, which feels like the right division of labor for the rest of our lives. We step beneath the hotel awning, and the city moves like a machine that forgives nothing and rewards endurance. The air smells like wet stone and hot cables. The curb seethes with rideshares. A tourist couple laughs at something innocent enough to prove innocence still exists. The journalist follows me out with the pace of someone who knows when the last quote matters more than the first. She thanks me for the record, then asks what I will do with this power now that it is mine by vote and paper and courage, her recorder low between us, her face attentive without hunger. I think of the whiteboard clock at 7:12, and the crimson folder and the scratched corner USB and the velvet humiliation of that toast, and I think of every woman who sat by kitchen doors while the Riverview made decisions, and I think of America's appetite for outcomes, not promises. On the sidewalk, with the city testing its lights on the river, I look at her, look past her to the street where people are building their nights from nothing, and say, what would you build if no one could call you an accessory again? Before you go, tell me in the comments which receipt sealed it for you, the ER timestamp, the printer logs, or D3, and why. If you want more insider corporate true crime stories, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next reveal. Share this with one friend who's been minimized at work and could use proof on their side. Drop your own workplace red flag below. What did you notice first, and what would you do at 7:12? Vote for part 2. Should I unpack the HR playbook, the audit trail tricks, or the boardroom vote?